Hallquist. Come back to Charles. Roberta Spoon.
Present.
Almas Udries.
Here.
Charles Hallquist. Let me see if I can't see Charlie at least. Okay, then we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, well, we have a quorum. Paul Kaufman isn't in today, and Charlie, we just lost Charlie. Maybe he'll come back.
All right, well then, since we have a quorum, I'm going to go ahead and start.
Okay.
All right, any public comments?
No public comment.
Fantastic, we're off to a great start. All right, action items. The first action item is review of Division 9 of the board rules and a bunch of other things. Are there any questions or comments by board members? Hearing none, is there any comments by staff? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Bobby. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Charlie, I love you. Fantastic.
And we are ready to vote. Thanasi Provolos,
Aye.
Tom Battaglia,
Aye.
Charles Hallquist,
Aye.
Roberta Spoon,
Aye.
Almas Udries.
Aye.
All votes are in, and the motion passes 5-0.
Fantastic. Item number 2, staff's recommendation to approve the payment of the annual supplemental benefit and Corbett settlement increase payments. I believe, Ted, you are up to talk about this one. And before you start, God bless it, Ted's gonna have a big head over this. I guess he got his capper out to the audit committee early, and everybody's all happy about it. So go ahead, Ted, take it away.
You have my memo in front of you. Staff recommends the board approve the payment of the annual supplemental benefit and the Corbett settlement increase to eligible retirees. And with that, I will entertain any questions that you may have.
I have a question, Tanasi, or a comment.
Fire away, Charlie.
We do have a bunch of new members on the board, so I was going to recommend that tomorrow at the board meeting, when Ted talks about this, he explains to everybody what the Corbett settlement is, as well as the annual supplemental benefit, so people will have an idea what it is, because you know that once we approve it tomorrow, it's going to make the newspaper. So I'd like to have our members know what it means.
All right. Ted, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Can you do it under 30 seconds?
Yes.
Then I approve. All right. Thank you. Can I get
I move to approve.
Fantastic. Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Bobby.
Who was my first mover? Was that Charlie?
Charlie.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we are ready to vote. Thanasi Provolos,
Yep.
Tom Battaglia,
Aye.
Charles Hallquist,
Aye.
Roberta Spoon,
Aye.
Almas Udries.
Aye.
All votes are in, and the motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Item number 3 is staff's recommendation to approve the 2021 drop interest crediting and drop annuity factor rates into revised board rules 6.1 and 6.4. Are there any questions by board members? Hearing none, is there any comment by staff? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve?
I so move.
Charlie, God bless you. Thank you. Second?
Tom will second.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Cynthia, do you want to call roll on that?
Thanasi Provolos,
Aye.
Tom Battaglia,
Aye.
Charles Hallquist,
Aye.
Roberta Spoon,
Aye.
Almas Udries.
Aye.
All votes are in, and the motion passes 5-0.
Fantastic. Item number 4 is the insurance overview and renewal of fiduciary insurance. I think there's a couple of people who may be talking about this, but Johnny, I'm going to start with you.
Hey, thank you, Thanasi. So before you is the staff's annual overview of our insurance program and Renewal Fiduciary Insurance. Today, joining me from Oakland, California is your fiduciary counsel, Harvey Lederman, who will start off by kind of giving a background on how fiduciary insurance in general, fits into your fiduciary duties, and his thoughts on the proposed coverage for fiduciary insurance. After that, we'll have a presentation by Melissa Satt-Birdwhistle, who is with their insurance brokerage out in Denver, Colorado. Okay, thank you both for joining us. Jessica Maloney, thank you so much for driving the presentation. Harvey, why don't we start with your comments, and then we'll go into the PowerPoint and Melissa and my presentation.
Sure, happy to do that. Thank you, Johnny, and good morning to everybody. Good morning, Benassi. Great to be with you this morning. I was asked to provide some color commentary on how to align the provision of fiduciary insurance to fiduciary duties. And so I've given you that memorandum. I don't want to go through it chapter and verse unless there are some questions, but just to kind of put this in a little bit of context, the system has risk already, whether we do something or not. And that risk is that people who serve on these boards and people who serve as public servants, especially of a pension fund, public employee pension fund, are covered by state law, and the system covers them in the event they get sued personally for events that happen, acts that they do during the course and scope of carrying out their responsibilities to the system and to its members. So this SDCERS is essentially an insurer against those liabilities. Now, many pension funds up and down the state handle that risk differently. Some systems, like CalPERS, for example, self-insure against that risk. And they maintain a large reserve on their books of self-insurance to cover any claims that come up against their members, against board members and staff members that would be covered under state law. Other systems lay off, if you will, mitigate that risk by going to third-party insurance carriers, as you have in the past, and that is absolutely authorized under state law. It may seem sometimes like you, by voting as a board member, for example, I'll just talk about the board right now, as a board member voting to have the system provide that insurance from a third party may seem like a personal conflict because you're doing something in your own personal best interest. The good news is that the legislature has decided that is in the best interest of the system and its members, and has specifically authorized the system to insure against those risks by providing third-party insurance. So there is a complete alignment, in my view, of a prudent third-party fiduciary insurance program and the fiduciary duties that each of the board members and staff members who would be covered have to the members of the system. My memorandum outlines the various ways that alignment comes about, but without going into too much detail, the issue that comes up is this a reasonable expense of administering the system? Constitution says you may only incur reasonable expenses of administration. And so with that, I would just draw your attention to the cost of the insurance, and is it on commercially reasonable terms? And Melissa can address that if you have any questions about that. One of the key things there is that as a fiduciary, and I'm going to just talk for a moment only about board members because it's just easier, but this also applies to the staff of SDCERS as well. It's very important to be able to attract talent to this board. And the only way you can do that is if the board members themselves have some assurance that the decisions that they make to the best of their ability on behalf of the members and beneficiaries of the system are not going to expose them to personal liability. In my experience, it's extremely difficult to get trustees to be willing to take on the responsibility of managing a multi-billion-dollar organization if they face personal liability and put their own personal assets at risk by carrying out the duties that are imposed on them. Fiduciary insurance allows them to sleep at night, allows you to sleep at night. It covers you, and especially as you'll see from the presentation, there's a provision of the insurance called, it's got a fancy name, but it's very simple, Side A DIC, Difference in Conditions Coverage. That's important to every individual who sits on the board and every individual who works at SDCERS, because as often happens, if you have experience with this, a claim is made, and then it takes either the insurance company or SDCERS some time to make a decision about whether there's coverage and who is covered and to what extent, and are there reservation of rights. And while that consideration is going on, if you're an individual who's been sued, your exposure starts on day one. You have to hire an attorney. You don't know if you're covered yet by the insurance policy. You don't know if they're going to reserve rights against you. But meanwhile, you got 30 days to respond to a complaint. This side DIC coverage is considered first dollar coverage. While all those coverage decisions are being made, this side DIC insurance drops down and covers you from your first dollar of exposure. That's what its purpose is, its initial purpose. Beyond that, it covers excess coverage above the tower of insurance carriers that you have. But that kind of coverage is extremely important. You cannot practically recruit good talent to work in these, to take on these responsibilities unless they have the comfort of knowing that if they haven't done anything intentionally wrong, that they're not going to be exposed out of pocket to defense costs. So that's a very important part of this, and directly aligned with allowing board members, in this case, to carry out your fiduciary responsibilities without a concern in the back of your mind that if you make a tough decision that someone is going to sue you and your personal assets in your house are going to be exposed to risk. So I hope the memorandum gives you some comfort about how and why third-party insurance works as part of your fiduciary responsibilities. Happy to answer any questions you might have about that. I did put one note at the end. People often talk about insurance as creating this moral hazard that somehow if you have insurance, you're going to act recklessly. I don't think in the instance of SDCERS or any trust retirement system that we should suppose that insurance is going to cause any board member or any staff member to act recklessly. That's the same concern you might have by obtaining automobile insurance. So I hope nobody harbors that concern that this, by having insurance, it's somehow going to cause people to act in ways that they wouldn't if they thought their own assets were at stake. With that, Mr. Chairman and Johnny, happy to answer any questions. The particular insurance that is being provided appears to me to be very customary for planned fiduciaries. It's always a judgment call as to the level of insurance that you want to carry. So I would take your representative's estimation of that in terms of total coverage relative to the premium that you're going to pay. Keep that in mind. There, you may want to balance that off. You may think, based on prior experience, you're carrying too much or too little insurance. So we should have that conversation as well. But with that, I'll turn it back to the chair, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Harvey, thank you very much. I got a couple of questions. I'll throw them all out to you and let you decide how you want to handle them. One is a little bit, I'd like you to just touch on cost a little bit. We were paying substantially more for a while there, and so the premiums have come down. If you compare us to what we were paying before, these premiums are quite tame by comparison. But what I'd like to know from you, since you have a great deal of experience representing a number of plans, for a plan of our size and for this level of coverage, are these costs reasonable in your experience? Second issue is, are the coverages reasonable for our size plan and for our type of plan? Meaning, are the levels correct? We've got essentially, we're talking about $25 million of insurance. I'm trying to figure out if in your experience that's appropriate and customary for a plan our size. I also wanted to ask you, the trustees do pay for a portion of this insurance, and I think it's important, especially for the general public and our members, to know what, number one, that the board members are paying for a portion of the insurance and what they're paying for. If you can explain that a little bit, or perhaps Melissa can, that'd be great. And then the last issue is, we are really being offered a choice between renewing our current coverage and an alternative coverage. It seems to me that really what's happening is we're flipping the primary carrier and the excess coverage carrier, and we're replacing Chubb with Markel. They're both rated companies, but I'm just trying to understand if any of that gives you pause of concern, or if there is a path under the renewable or the alternative that you think, in your experience, might be a safer or a better path for approach, despite the roughly $10,000 difference in premiums, which is insignificant in my opinion.
Okay, let me take those in order. I took a few notes. On the cost, the premium from my experience looking at other systems up and down the state is pretty much in line with what they're being quoted. Every system's underwriting is different, so your risk profile as the insurers underwrite it could be different. 10 years ago, you were probably paying a higher premium because of the history of the controversies that SDCERS found itself in more than 10 years ago. That's tapered off by now, I'm guessing, and so you're probably closer to the ballpark. But this is about, for this level of coverage, this is very much, in my experience, in the ballpark of what other systems are paying in California. I alluded to that. You asked the question about, is the coverage reasonable in terms of amount and the size? I would ask Melissa and the folks at Gallagher about what they've learned from the underwriting process as to how SDCERS is viewed and the potential risk. The $25 million, I think, is certainly adequate. One of my first questions was, I was thinking it might be higher, but if your claims history is such that, personal claims against board members and staff members are rare, it seems to me that $25 million is a prudent amount to cover at the price that you're being quoted to pay. But this is always a judgment call, and there's no precise right or wrong answer, Tanasi, for anybody. Whether you're talking about your own life insurance and health insurance, or in this case for SDCERS. It's pretty much a judgment call about balancing the risk and the coverage and the premium that you're going to pay. I think you're in the sweet spot, quite frankly, of what other systems are doing, so you're not an outlier in that regard. Premium seems to be appropriate for the amount of coverage that you're getting. The coverage seems reasonable. I asked a number of questions in the run-up to this meeting that were answered satisfactorily. I wanted to know that certain things were covered. For example, I wanted to make sure that if anybody on the board or staff are serving on advisory committees for any of the investment management vehicles that we're invested in, that would be covered as part of their fiduciary responsibilities to SDCERS. We've received confirmation that will be covered. So, there were a few things I wanted to make sure that former trustees are covered, individuals under the plan, because it's a claims-made policy, which simply means that it gets triggered when a claim is made, but a claim could be made 2 years after somebody steps off the board. And I wanted to make sure that that person was also going to be covered regardless of when the claim made, if the claim was about something they did while they were on the board. And we've received confirmation that that is true, that a former trustee or a former employee is a covered insured under the program. So I'm comfortable with the coverage that's been outlined to me. I haven't honestly read the policy. Nobody asked me to do that, so I didn't think that was appropriate for me to do. But in the general parameters of what is a claim, who is insured, when is it covered, who's going to defend you, all those key issues, I'm satisfied from how they've been described to me that they are reasonable and protect the board and staff quite well. What you alluded to, what is known as the waiver of recourse premium. If you look at, in my memo, I quoted the government code provision that allows our board to provide third-party insurance. And it says that you can provide that insurance so long as there is recourse against the individual, let's say a board member. In the event that it turns out that whatever the acts were that created the claim were acts that are not covered and not coverable by insurance. Fiduciaries are covered and entitled to indemnification and defense for things that occur during the course and scope of carrying out their responsibilities, which implies that if there are things that are done that are outside the course and scope of their responsibilities, those things may not be insured against, and there's recourse back against the individual if the insurer goes ahead and defends and pays money to defend somebody, and it later turns out that what they did, a court determines was outside the scope of their responsibilities. There are things that cannot be covered lawfully by fiduciary insurance. They involve mostly intentional acts, intentional wrongful acts against committed by an insured. It could be sexual harassment. It could be slander. It could be defamation. It could be any number of persons. It could be assault and battery. Somebody goes nuts and strikes someone on the board or in the audience, for example, in some exercise of rage.
You're not recommending that, I take it?
I'm not suggesting that anybody do that.
Okay. Just checking.
But personal torts, if you will, personal wrongdoing like that, intentional wrongdoing, is not covered by fiduciary insurance. Now what happens is a claim is made, it's tendered to the insurance company, and the insurance company says, okay, we'll cover you, Mr. Priovalos, for the claim that's being made against you. But in the event it turns out to be something that you're not entitled to coverage, and we've spent a lot of money defending you, we have recourse against you to go claw back that cost, that out of pocket from you personally, because you should have been paying for your own defense, not us. That recourse exposes the individual board member or staff member to a risk. So now the question is, can that individual insure against that risk of recourse exposure? And the answer is, both under law and under this policy, the answer is yes. The individual can buy a waiver from the insurance company, waiving that right of recourse, to reach back, to claw back to the individual. And that is what you board members and staff members who are affected by this buy every year for $25 or $40. It's priced very inexpensively. And so when you're asked to write a check out of your pocket each year to the insurer for a waiver of recourse premium, for that 25 or 40 bucks, you are buying off the right of the insurance company to claw back to you and seek recourse in the event they've gone out of pocket for something that was your responsibility and not the insurance company's responsibility. Does that make sense to everybody? That's what that waiver of recourse premium is. You're individually, and the law says you must pay that out of your own pocket. SDCERS cannot pay that for you. You have to buy off that recourse risk by paying the 25 bucks out of your pocket, which is why everybody has to cut their own check for that. Finally, you asked a question about, do we have appropriate stratas, and to save a few dollars, does it make sense? You have a tower of coverage here, as Melissa will explain, where, all that you have is essentially, instead of placing all your insurance, $25 million, with one carrier, you're spreading the risk based, and you're picking 3 carriers, all of whom are highly rated, and you're saying one of them will cover the first tranche, another one will cover the next highest tranche of liability, and then one over that. And insurance companies often switch around where they are in the tower. That's not unusual. I would suggest you, since you're not familiar with Merkel, I can't remember which one how it is. You may not be familiar with them. They're new to your tower, if you will. Perhaps Melissa can explain who they are, but they all appear to be A or A+ rated insurance companies. And all you're doing by constructing these levels is pricing different risks to different carriers based on how they underwrite it, and they'll be quoting premiums to you based upon what their exposure is and the limits of their exposure. So that's an art, not a science, that I will leave to the people who know insurance better than I do about what the pros and cons of having RLI and Hudson and Merkel stacked up in the order that they are.
Harvey, thank you for that. I have one final follow-up question, which is, in terms of these policies, do we have the right at SDCERS to select our own defense counsel, or are we required to use counsel on a panel for the insurance company? Or do you know?
My understanding is that you can assign your own counsel, but that the insurance carriers have an agreed upon rate, maximum rate that they will pay towards that counsel. Frequently, as if you have experience with this, insurance panel counsel, generally because of the volume of work that they provide to insurance companies, carriers, they have discounted rates for their carriers. And so classically, insurance counsel rates are much lower than the rates that you would experience from knowledgeable counsel who you would pick yourself, most likely. The insurance, and Melissa can explain this a little more in detail, the insurance here has an agreed upon rate that they would contribute towards the hourly fees that you would have if you chose your own counsel as opposed to a panel counsel assigned by the insurance company. That's my understanding of it. If I'm wrong, please correct me, Melissa. But that's how it works generally, and that's typical of all my pension fund clients. They generally are allowed, because of the unique expertise that some counsel have, specifically with regard to public employee pension funds. Most pension funds are more comfortable selecting their own counsel and taking the percentage reimbursement from the insurance carrier than allowing the insurance carrier to appoint somebody off their own panel who does nothing but represent the insurers.
Harvey, thank you very much. Melissa, I think it's up to you. A couple of things I would just say. We appreciate all of our vendors, but we love our vendors who are brief and succinct during these long board meetings. And then lastly, would you also confirm that the defense costs are separate from the policy coverage, or if they're included in the policy coverage? All right?
Sure, yeah. Thank you guys for having me this morning. I appreciate the opportunity. I will try to keep it as brief as possible. Harvey covered almost everything, so I'll just try and add a little bit of color to each one of those things so we can get through it. So if we want to advance to the next slide, we just had a couple of slides here to touch on. Really, this just is a brief outline of the coverages that are covered elsewhere. So these are not coverages that we place. They are currently covered by the city and outside of Gallagher. The next slide just briefly lists the coverages that we do currently carry and place on behalf of SDCERS. And we can get into, and the next couple of slides really get into the meat of the fiduciary coverage. So if there's no questions about those other coverages, we can skip right over to the fiduciary. And Harvey did really a great job of summarizing everything that we really have listed here as far as what fiduciary is intended to cover. I think the important thing to remember in fiduciary is that it really, the coverage is intended to cover these losses, which we become legally obligated to pay along with defense costs that come along with that. We do have a couple of exclusions listed here. I would say the first couple of exclusions that you see listed seem a little bit scary. You probably think, well, my goodness, if those things are excluded, what does this cover? But I think to say we have the exclusions listed here simply to say these individual claims on their own do not stand as a coverage under the fiduciary policy. However, if we have a plan participant or someone that brings a claim against us alleging these things, then there is coverage. That's where coverage kicks in, if that makes sense. The last couple of exclusions that we have listed there are really just standard exclusions on any fiduciary liability policy. The reason for that being is that they're better covered somewhere else. The next slide, if we could advance that, really is an illustration of the tower that Harvey was referring to. This is how we build up the limit of what our current program structure looks like. So we have our retention down there at the bottom. We're responsible for the first $2 million. After that, we have our primary coverage, and then we start building our excess tower after that. And to answer your question, this tower is inclusive of defense as well. So we have this $25 million tower in total. The defense is actually included in that aggregate limit.
Which means, when you say included, that means it reduces the amount that's available to pay claims.
Yes, it would reduce the amount that we would have available to pay any settlements, judgments, things like that. That's correct.
Okay, so if I can just pause there for a second, Johnny and Harvey, I think what we just want, the board probably wants to understand, those legal fees can be quite expensive. $5-6 million for a case potentially, depending on the claims. That effectively reduces our coverage. My question now is $25 million still appropriate for our system and our coverage if that's the case?
Sure, Harvey, if you let me start off. I had a long conversation with Gallagher and looking at our history as well. And it's my opinion that the amount proposed is adequate to cover, even though it does include defense costs. You know, we've had fiduciary insurance since 2007, and we haven't used that insurance, one, because of claims. So one could say that the $25 million is adequate, given our claims history. Secondly, well, I mean, we've looked at what other systems our size are purchasing as well, with insurance included in the total amount. And we are, again, in the lower end of the spectrum of insurance, but because of our claims history, we do feel that this is an appropriate amount. Harvey, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think one thing to keep in mind is that the retention, that is the deductible in layman's terms, of $2 million should cover most of the defense costs of most litigation that might arise under this without eating into your insurance coverage. So you would still have $25 million of claims coverage over and above $2 million worth of defense costs. I think that's pretty good coverage without worrying about defense costs.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if I can add as well, you know, what we have on our side is some tools that we use as far as benchmarking limits and how we get to what we feel like is an appropriate limit. So we use kind of an outside third party called Advisen that takes data from all different kinds of government agencies, public pension plan funds, can kind of help provide some benchmarking from that. Some of the factors that go into that benchmarking are pension asset size as well as the participant number. And so when we ran that benchmarking for this renewal, what we really came up with was the benchmarking range really gave us anywhere between $25 million and $40 million. So, you know, us purchasing at that $25 million limit, we feel like is appropriate. You are within that range.
Thank you.
Melissa, did you want to continue?
Yep, the next slide, again, just kind of outlines our renewal options. It shows our expiring program versus the two options that we have. And I know there was some questions surrounding flipping out RLI and Hudson as far as that goes in the tower. What I can tell you, one of the main reasons we felt like, and our recommendation would be to go to that option over there on the right as far as Hudson goes, really did come back to those pre-negotiated council rates. And so actually Hudson is willing to pay a little bit more than RLI as far as those pre-negotiated rates go for our chosen council. So not only do we see a little bit of premium relief, but that's a better condition as far as I'm concerned. Finally, just the last slide, I think, just again kind of outlines, again, our final recommendation, which is this is how we would propose that we structure the program moving forward. And just wanted to confirm, we did do a significant marketing effort this year. We approached probably close to 15 markets to make sure that our program was competitive and that we were receiving the best terms and conditions out there in the current marketplace. To touch on the premium just a little bit, I'll let you know that the market in general from a management liability standpoint is hardening a little bit, especially in the fiduciary space. There's been a lot of excessive fees litigations and some claim activity that's come up in the last couple of years that has impacted the market's ability to underwrite and provide rate and even capacity. Whereas in the past, the carrier might have given us $10 million in limit. Now they're kind of cutting back and only providing $5 million, hence the reason we kind of have to build that tower. And really just kind of that economic market kind of uncertainty at the moment that unfortunately COVID has sort of brought into things. But overall, feel like that we brought a great alternative to the program and feel comfortable moving forward.
Melissa?
Between Chubb and Marco?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa, will you comment on Marco, their health, and what the A and the Roman numerals after their naming?
Yeah, absolutely. So Markel is another, they're really known in the management liability space. They are a known carrier. That is kind of their area of focus is management liability. And they do have an A rating. When approaching all marketplaces, really what we want to do is take a look at their AM Best financial strength rating, which really just demonstrates their financial strength and ability to meet their financial responsibilities when it comes to paying claims and meeting policy terms and conditions. So as far as Markel is concerned, it's an A-rated carrier and strong financially.
All right. Then if there are there any questions by board members? And hearing none, Charlie, you want to move this particular motion?
I'd be happy to. I so move that we approve it.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Bobby. Cynthia, do your magic.
Thanasi Provolos,
Aye.
Tom Battaglia,
Aye.
Charles Harquist,
Aye.
Roberta Spoon,
Aye.
Alma Sudries.
Aye.
All votes are in, and the motion passes 5-0.
All right. Thank you, guys. Before we move on, I just want to make a final comment just to say I know this was a lot longer presentation than I normally allow in these meetings, but I think it's kind of important, so thank you to everybody. I also should point out that we're going into the holidays, and Harvey's partners called me to tell him he's a little under budget, so they asked me if I could just add some time for him today, and I've tried to do my best on that, Harvey, so all right, fantastic. All right, we're going to move into reports.
We have
Cynthia?
one more voting item, number 5.
Thank you, Cynthia. I apologize. Staff's recommendation to approve a contract extension with CGI Technologies and Solutions Inc. for Information Technology Services. Unless there's questions by somebody on the board, I think I'll entertain a motion.
I so move.
Thank you, Charlie. Can I get a second, Bobby, by chance?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ready to
Cynthia?
vote? Thanasi Provolos,
Aye.
Tom Battaglia,
Aye.
Charles Hallquist,
Aye.
Roberta Spoon,
Aye.
Almas Udries.
Aye.
All votes are in, and the motion passes 5-0.
Fantastic. Now we are into reports. Cynthia, can you give us your report on Member Services Division, please?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. We have many projects going on right now, and I'm very proud of our whole team for planning ahead so well. We are ready. First, I'd like to talk about America's favorite topic right now, elections. And we have the terms for our board members, Tom Battaglia, Jeffrey Wallace, and Mike McBride will be coming to an end on March 31st of next year. So we are going to be holding 2 general member seat elections and 1 for the fire safety seat. We do our elections in 2 steps. First, we have the call for nominations, and then we have the voting materials where the members are actually able to vote. So the nomination packages will be going out scheduled for December 11th. We will have our website with the nomination materials open and ready December 14th through January 6th. Anyone who is eligible and has 10 folks who will sign up for them, and they are welcome to nominate themselves, and they will be ready for that. Once that portion is completed and the nominations are approved, we then, assuming that we have more nominations than seats, we will proceed with our election. And the voting materials will be mailed out to all the folks who are eligible to vote. This election takes place online and also via phone. So people have various options to be able to vote to ensure that everyone can do so. The election website and the phones will be open, we are planned to have them open from Thursday, January 28th to Thursday, February 11th. And there is a dedicated helpline if any member has any trouble voting. The main thing we get calls about is people lose their letter with their PIN number and they just want to make sure that they can vote. So we appreciate that, and that has worked very well our last few times. So we are looking forward to all of this going very smoothly. Jessica Maloney is working closely with our excellent election vendor. Everything is in line and ready to roll. And we are expecting that we will have the final results certified by mid-February and ready for a transition in March. Then I'd like to
ask on a second real quick. The election vendor is not out of Georgia or Nevada, correct?
That is correct.
Just want to make sure. And then I think on behalf of the members who are leaving, I automatically request a recount by hand. Okay, go ahead.
Understood. And we have, the timeline has some extra space in it to allow for any such things. So we are prepared because we pay attention, right? We know how the world works. So the next item is that you recall we've approved several things thus far in this meeting, and at the full board tomorrow, there will be some decisions made that affect members. So we are certainly expecting a high number of requests for appointments from members based on a change that will likely happen with the drop interest rates. We are quite prepared for that, and we have a comprehensive outreach plan that we are prepared to launch as soon as the board meeting is over tomorrow, when we know exactly what has been decided, and we will be sharing that with our members by all means, and we'll be assisting everyone who needs help. Always glad to do so. And then finally, we have 10 big outreach projects going on, and our call center has certainly been very busy. As you'll recall, they are working remotely, which has its awesome advantages and also challenges. So we've been working short staff for a while. We're preparing for an interview process, and just want to note in all transparency that our call wait times have been just over 30 seconds in the last couple of months, but that is certainly because of working in a remote environment and working towards to increase our staffing, and also going to be getting some better equipment for our remote use, and that will help with the servicing as well. All in all, we are absolutely taking good care of our members, always glad to do so. That concludes what I wanted to share with you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Any questions? Hearing none. Cynthia, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate that. The second report is Benefits Administration. Marcel, I think you have some comments to make on this.
I do. Good morning. I wanted to talk a bit more about the drop interest rates that the full board will be voting on tomorrow. So B&G did vote to approve the change in the interest crediting rate for drop. That's the money, that's the amount that is paid to the accounts as they sit with SDCERS, and the drop annuity rate, which is if a member chooses to annuitize those funds when they retire, that's the rate that would be paid. This change that we're asking the board to approve tomorrow is a fairly significant change. It's a 1.5 point drop in the interest rate and a full point drop in the annuity rate. We have not had that kind of a change in those rates since we started calculating separate rates back in July of 2009. So one of the things I talked about in my board report is that of the 973 members who do not have to exit drop by 12/31, about 250 of them will have been in drop longer than the average. So if you recall, back in June, we had a little over 200 applications for retirements come through. We're looking at, we may have that same type of volume or even more. As Cynthia said, call center is prepared, counselors are prepared, our business administration division is prepared to do those calculations, and we do have a multi-prong outreach that we've planned. So after the board meeting, assuming that the board does approve the rates, Jessica Maloney has already drafted an article to go on our website, and she will do social media outreach, as we always do after board meetings. We also have a letter that we have put together to send out to all of the members in drop to let them know what this change is and how it may impact them and how they can get in contact with us. And then the last thing is we work with Lou Maggi every month to help him draft letters or draft a column for the Police Officers Association newsletter called The Informant. And so we have worked with Lou again to provide more information so that he can provide that to the police officers who may be impacted. And that was the main thing I wanted to highlight in my report, and happy to answer any questions.
So Marcel, real quick, the strategy if you're a retiree and drop is either you retire before 12/31 to get the current annuity rates, or you gamble that the annuity rates will go back up in the future before your mandatory drop period. Is that correct?
Correct. Now, we do have, so the 973, 194 are going to have to exit drop before January of 2022. So for those members, there's not really a chance that they're taking. They either retire before 12/31/2020, or they're going to retire sometime in 2021, which would have the lower rates. Not everybody annuitizes the monies. A number of our members do choose to roll over their drop monies to some other qualifying plan, and so then they wouldn't be concerned about the change in the drop annuity rate. But yes, that is the options that people have.
Fantastic. Any questions from board members?
Tom has a question.
All right.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Marcel, good morning. Just wanted to verify. So this isn't the money that's sitting in their drop account for up to the 5 years. It's after they leave drop. If they annuitize it, then that's the percentage that they're putting it into, right?
It's both rates, Tom. So the rate when the money is sitting in their drop account, that was at 2.5%. The recommendation is for that to drop to 1%. So if the board passes that tomorrow, starting with the first quarterly interest payment in 2021, which is March 31st, 2021, they would receive basically 0.25% of interest because it's 1% for the entire year. The second change is in the drop annuity rate, and that is after they exit drop and they have their drop monies, they need to decide whether they're going to annuitize them and take it as an additional payment stream, or they're going to roll them over somewhere else or take it as a lump sum. If they choose to annuitize it, that's the rate that's dropping from 3.1% to 2.1%.
And for the first interest rate, if they've already accomplished 3 of the 5-year period, they're still getting that rate percentage that was there previously. It'd be the future 2 years would be the lower rate, correct?
The interest rate could potentially be adjusted January 1st of every year. So yes, the past 3 years, the interest they've earned the past 3 years is in their accounts, and that doesn't change. But if they choose to stay and drop another 2 years, next year would be at 1%, and then we'll do the same calculation again and come back to the board in November of 21 with any recommendations for changes for January 1st, 2022.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Sure. Any other questions? All right.
I just want to clarify one thing, Marcel. Going back to Tom's last question, it's the 1% is calculated on the total balance. It's not calculated on just the future years, right? The new interest rate is on the balance.
It's on the balance, right? It's paid quarterly. The 1% is the annual interest rate. It's paid quarterly, and it's paid on their full drop account balance each quarter.
Okay, and then the impact on the annuities that people are receiving is that their monthly payment will go down.
No, on the annuities, once you set your annuity, that rate is set and it does not change. So that's the difference. Is if people want to exit drop by 12/31/2020, then their annuity will be calculated using 3.1%, and that does not change for the life of the annuity. So anyone who's already retired and receiving an annuity, their annuity does not change. It's only for newly set up annuities.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Any other questions? All right, then. We've got a few other reports. Unless there are questions by board members or specific comments by staff, I'm going to move past this section. Are there any questions? All right, fantastic. Hearing none, then I guess we're into questions and comments. In general, are there any questions or comments by anybody on the board? Anybody on staff? Okay, there's no closed session, and so I guess the last thing I'll mention is I want to thank everybody again for reading the reports. I want to thank staff for writing the reports. Really appreciate the time you guys put into it. The reports are well done. Really appreciate the board members' time in reading it. It does help make these meetings go faster, so thank you. Charlie, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Take care.